let me start with one question that I've been thinking about. So, um, just recently, I have exited what was my best position, and I actually wrote to Nick talking about it. And I'd like to get you guys' views on when to exit a stock, especially if you haven't really reached the ultimate peak that you were expecting, and what would be the reasons for that. And I'm sharing this because in my experience, what happened here with this company, and this was I better not mention the name because I think there are a few people from this company that actually follow the channel, but uh, they changed their whole sort of purpose of being midway through this bull market. And what I found was most sort of disturbing about it from a shareholder's perspective was that they sort of just came out and said, hey, we're doing this, not we're going to do this, like we are doing it right now, or we have already done something that wasn't really in the plan at all. And a lot of people were taken aback, and sold the stock. And I sold the stock not because I didn't think it was a good company. In fact, I do very much think that this stock is going to go way higher, which seems illogical for me to exit that position, believing that it's going to go way higher. But because I went in for a reason, and that reason will not play out in the way that I was hoping or expecting, I decided to say, okay, you're on your own. I'm gonna grab a little bit of my money since, let's face it, there are a lot of opportunities popping up now, and I'm gonna put my money to work somewhere else. Like, has this happened to you guys, and what are your thoughts on it?
Okay, I will start off because I think I have a good general point to make, and
Mm-hmm.
it's great that this kind of came to me. I have a specific point afterwards, so we'll start with the general. I think it's really tough for the average speculator to deal with, and part of it is that we really should go into these companies like knowing why we went in, like what was the specific strategy or the specific catalyst. You don't have to know everything, but you want to have like some type of conviction, because if this type of change happens and you don't have that conviction at first, you'll just kind of let it go. You'll be like, oh, these guys know what they're doing. They just did a 180 on their strategy, but like it's okay. Like they'll figure it
But
out.
they're
And I
smart.
think, yeah, exactly. They're smart, and we get in, and then you start to get into the hope phase. And I forgot there's like a specific saying about that, but yeah, you don't really want to rely too much on hope in the mining industry, or you're going to get crushed. I mean, that's just the way it goes. Too much hope is not going to work out for you. But with that said, I think it's like there is this two sides of it. You can go into something and know why you're in it, and they might make a change. Sometimes it can be a positive thing, and maybe you're a little skeptical, but I think there's legitimate reasons to actually stick with the company or even buy more. But that only works if you really know the company. Like, you have to understand that, and most people don't. So in general, you probably should really take a good look. And if you're not going to sell everything, I would say, honestly, I would say that is a signal to at least lighten up a bit. Like, especially
Mm-hmm.
like you just mentioned, if you've already made some money on it and there's some type of change, it's just kind of one of those signals you should pay attention to. Now, with all of that were general points, but I do have a specific one, and I guess kind of this will probably happen throughout the conversations, but I'm not trying to push my stocks like too much, as we're discussing, but it is the easiest way to use a real example is use stuff that we really know really well, and stuff we own. And this is
Mm-hmm.
this one I haven't discussed anywhere outside of co.ca, but Thor Explorations is a great personal example for me, because I think I went through the whole cycle. When I got in, I knew it was a smaller West African exploration play. The thing I was really excited about was getting information from the CEO that it wasn't full information, but I knew that there was some new type of project coming. Now, it took a while for that to develop. Simultaneously with that announcement, I did have a catalyst, occur. I made money
Mm-hmm.
because because of I knew that there was going to be a raise at a higher price. So already I had some success. But
Nice.
that specific company, their new project was in Nigeria, of all places. So it's like, if you're going into a new country, I had no idea that was the case. Like, that's kind of scary, because you're like, oh gosh, like this is not. I didn't buy this to go into like some new country that no one's talking about. But as I thought about it, I kind of weighed the positives and negatives. Positive is that the guy running it, Shagan Lawson, he's Nigerian. So it's like, okay, that's really unusual too. But if you're going to have someone, from a new country be involved with, or they're actually from that new country, I consider that a positive. So I was like, okay, that's good. But on the negative, I think this is still the strategy, and I actually need to get an update from the company. It's no longer just an exploration play. They still have exploration projects in countries I feel I understand better, like Burkina Faso and Senegal, but they actually have a more advanced project in Nigeria, which looks like it could be really good economically, but they want to put it into production at a very small scale. And for me, that's a little bit of a red flag. Some people are okay with that, but when you're putting something into production at 20 or 30,000 ounces a year, that's what I'm expecting. I was thinking, okay, I don't know if I want to be involved with that, because that's a lot of risk for a small mine. So yeah. I kind of did a happy medium. I took even more profits, but I still held on to some shares. I actually bought a few more shares in this one. Not very many, but just a few more, because it's come down a bit. But I feel like I got the best of both worlds. I think I kind of doubled my money in terms of profits I took. Mm-hmm. But like, I'm not out of this by any means. I still felt like I wanted to hold on, because I have kind of bought into that new story. So this is a really unusual example, but I think it's one of the best examples I could come up with for something where I felt the story changed very significantly, but it was still kind of tied in to the original strategy, and there's still some positives that I could legitimately come up with. So like that might have been all complicated what I just explained, but you really do want to go into those types of details when you see a company kind of surprise you and change the way they're going about business.
Yeah, well, I think there's so many things that can and do go wrong in these projects that, all in all, not all of them, well, most of them will change some element of how they operate, midway, and that's completely acceptable. Yeah, cool. Jay, what about you? Any stories?
Yeah, I like the comments you guys are making so far. Whereas you look at these plays and they're so fluid and dynamic, you don't approach it necessarily from this binary perspective, because these stories are always evolving. Nick made a good point about how you don't have to sell everything. You could just sell a partial position, and ultimately you have to go with what you're comfortable with. I think it's very important to detach kind of the emotions, out of your decision. Like, if you go into a particular story and this is your thesis, and that thesis, changes drastically, whether the company, they give up on a project and they find something new, or they move into a different jurisdiction or something. You always have to kind of reassess where things are at, and if your comfort level is such where you're like, hold on, this is what I signed up for originally. I don't think there's anything wrong with either selling some stock just to get your risk appetite to a level you're more comfortable with, or even to exit out of the position entirely. And I think it's really important when we make these decisions, we don't rely on price action, because it can be really deceiving. One thing I've learned with mining stocks in general is they're so volatile in nature. It doesn't really make sense to hold on just because it's up 20% in a month or something, and you're like, I don't really like what management or the company's doing. I don't like this new direction, but because the share price is performing so well, I'm just going to hold on and kind of be complacent. I think those are kind of the type of things that we later kind of regret. When I look at my own portfolio, this actually gives me two examples in the past year where this has kind of happened. During the late 2015, I got into a company, it's Pilot Gold, which was one of those early exploration stories, and they had multiple projects. And at the time, it seemed perspective, there was a lot of focus on Turkey, and they were developing these gold, copper projects. And, I'm not a geologist or anything like that, but just what you were hearing on the surface. And, it just sounded good. And the share price was cheap. The market cap was low. So they had multiple projects going on. So I initiated a position. And, when the bull market in 2016 in precious metals started to take off, naturally, rising tide lifts all boats. Every company does well. So my shares had more than doubled. But when I was following up on the story and, checking out the corporate presentation slides, it's like 1 minute Turkey is the main focus. And then, they had this other project in Nevada, Kinsley Mountain, and that was kind of the secondary focus. But during the middle of this year, the story kind of changed. It was like, Turkey had some issues and, it was kind of, for me, who's somebody who's not in the industry or, follows up on this stuff on a kind of day by day basis. I just checked the recent updates and I noticed it was like, I had this question mark in my head, like what happened to the Turkey projects and those assets. And the company put out a resource for Kinsley Mountain. And then it kind of went silent for a while. There were really no new updates in regards to drill results or, where they were trying to go with the resource estimate, if this deposit was going to become a mine and those kind of things. So, over the year, the course of the year, all of a sudden there was this new project in Utah. It's called Goldstrike. And then they purchased another asset as well. And as an investor who got in at an earlier stage, you're kind of, scratching your head a little bit because you're not sure what to make of it. Are these new projects more prospective? Mm-hmm. Or, did something go wrong with the previous assets where, maybe they're not economical or the resource is not large enough or high grade enough? It's not going to work out. So the company knows a little more than you do. So, they're kind of shifting focus, but they're not really giving you the whole story. So, at that time I had to reassess my thesis. And even though the share price was doing so well, when you're up, 200, 300% on a position, I think it's just human nature where complacency sets in and you don't really feel the need or the rush to have to do anything because when the stock price goes up, you feel so smart and you feel like you're making all the right moves, I think it was around September time frame. I just had to reassess that position and I didn't really feel comfortable enough moving forward because I didn't really know the direction the company was going. So I was actually, for myself, I was happy to just close out that position entirely and just take the profits. These mining stocks are so volatile. I think, if you try to approach it with, I guess, less emotions, one thing you kind of accept is there will always be instances where you sell too early and a company just continues rising, and maybe it just takes off and, you miss the train for good. But anytime you're in profits, and especially if we're talking about, relatively big profits, like 40, 50% or higher, I just don't think it's something you should ever regret, because you got in, you made some solid gains, and if it runs away, so be it. There will always be more companies and more opportunities out there. And one other point I want to make is there's another company that I got into, and it was, just like Nick pointed out with Thor Exploration, it was a company that, they were initially focused on a certain commodity, and then all of a sudden they did this 180 and they pursued something else, and they really threw shareholders off base. And that company is actually the largest holding that I have right now in my portfolio. It's Borimian Limited. So earlier this year they were actually called Borimian Gold. It was a gold focused exploration company, and they had these gold assets in Mali. And around March timeframe, they announced, to the whole world, they had acquired this lithium project. And it's funny if you go on any of the online forums, and you had a lot of angry, frustrated shareholders who are like, what's your deal? I signed up. Now all of a sudden, you think you're this lithium company or a multi-asset. So a lot of people sold out. There were probably some emotional shareholders, and the thesis changed. Since that point, the stock is up probably like 300 plus% year to date kind of return. But I don't think there's anything wrong if an investor who was in the story for gold decided lithium's not for me. I don't understand lithium, or it's not the fundamental story I'm interested in. So I'll sell out and book profits, or just redeploy capital elsewhere. In the case of Borimian, during that heat of the moment, you don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, Luckily for them, and whatever shareholders got on board early enough, the lithium deposit they acquired, it turned out to be pretty prospective. It's a high grade project right now. It's probably the highest grade undeveloped project on the ASX, the Australian Stock Exchange, and the initial drill program was, I think it was like 10,000 meters, and they actually found lithium, or in this case, it's a hard rock lithium, so spodumene, and they found it in abundance, and the project's moving forward. It's making good progress, but at the time, back in March, April timeframe, before they had drilled their first hole, you don't know what's in store because it's an unknown commodity in that sense, where it's just this big question mark. So at that time, if you sold out, and it's like everything is all like hindsight now, like I just wouldn't have any regret, because if your thesis is, I'm focused on gold and this company is kind of going in multiple directions, then, if it runs away, then so be it. Just move on and, look for the next thing, and just ultimately stick with what you're comfortable with, and don't let emotions and price dictate what you do.
So I talk with Jay like a lot about these little companies these days. It's just so funny. He brought up two examples where I sold both of these for like very similar reasons to what Jay just described, and I haven't even really talked about these with Jay, but I think it's neat because Pilot Gold I sold like basically at the bottom. So I wanted to first point out, we were talking about like price action. I think that's one of the hardest things. Like I don't regret selling, but of course it like tripled, right after I sold. That happens so often when you're in this business. But I'm sure I redeployed that capital to some other company, because I was pretty much fully invested a year ago when Pilot Gold bought him, and so I don't regret that one. Like I'm actually surprised Pilot Gold jumped as much as it did. I think Jay's absolutely right. I saw the signals. I mean, they even, the CEO resigned and they got a new one in. But miraculously, Pilot Gold, got a lot of funding and it worked out. That one, like whether I sold at a bottom or a top, I think for me it made sense to sell immediately. And I didn't have a large position. But Beryllium Gold, or Beryllium, which is now or it was Beryllium Gold and now it's Beryllium because of the change of lithium, I do regret selling, because I had a small position in that one and I knew the gold story, and I did sell, not really in panic, but I just couldn't, grasp the whole lithium thing, because we were kind of at the beginning of, this like lithium mini bubble or whatever you want to call it. But honestly, like I don't know as much, like close to as much about the lithium industry as gold, but the more I like learn, I do think it's somehow, Beryllium is one of the more legitimate companies. And so it is another perfect example of, I think there at the time, if you were in it for gold, there wasn't the highest probability that this was going to be a legitimate play. But it's fascinating that it was in Mali, an area that, almost, there are maybe another company or two looking now, but at the time that was completely new. So yeah, like when I brought up Thor Explorations, it's like, oh, really a new country for lithium, but they're finding high grade stuff, and it seems like it's worked out. So that one, I actually do regret selling right away, because there was a change, but I didn't take the time to do a little more due diligence. And I mean, of course, immediately after I sell, it goes up 4 or 5 times. So, it's just kind of funny to look at it from the other perspective. And I just want to say it's hard to sell when things are down, and it's hard to sell when things are up. But when there is a change, you want to try to like not think about that. So I'm glad you guys brought up the whole price action thing, because if the story changes, regardless of which direction it's moving, you've got to reevaluate and then make your decision.